If you have children or grandchildren, you're very aware of the teacher shortage in St. Louis. It's real and it's affecting the education of our youth. According to the Economic Policy Institute, the lack of teachers and staff threatens the students' learning ability and is causing high teacher turnover in our nation. There are many people who had an interest in becoming a teacher and changed their minds for various reasons to attain other career choices. I'm Sarah Bernard, filling in for Carol Daniel. This episode of The Issues will focus on education, the teacher shortage crisis. We'll have a panel consisting of local teachers, former teachers, and staff who will share their ideas and solutions to decrease the teacher shortage. That's all coming up on this episode of The Issues. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Today's panel will consist of people who have been affected by the teacher shortage. Before we get to our panel, we'll begin with a former teacher telling her story as to why she changed her career option early on.
Because in school I had a difficult time learning, and I wanted to help other students who had a difficult time learning. I wanted to help make that process easier for them. I went to school to be a teacher for 4 years, and I became a sub for a few years, subbing second grade. And then I decided to switch fields and own my own business. It just wasn't enough for the time and the work that you put in to lesson plans and getting there early, staying there late. It just didn't compensate at all. I think there's multiple things. A lot of people just don't want to put in the extra time and the work to educate these students and be their everything. I think that takes a special person to be a teacher and really hone in on that person or that student. But I think it just gets a little tiresome at times and emotional, especially when you can't help the student that you want to help. I think not only the pay, it's a lot of dangerous activities going on in schools. You have parents that's yelling at you about their kid, and being a teacher and a parent, it goes hand in hand. Whatever the teacher's doing in class, it needs to be implemented at home. And some of the parents expect the teachers to raise the kids, and if they're not doing right, it's the teacher's fault. I always want to teach students like me. I'm a visual learner, so I had a lot of visual aids, whether it's learning how a assembly line works. I cut out different pieces of, say they're making donuts. You cut out the donuts and you add the sprinkles. So it was just very hands-on learning experiences. So I have a 7-year-old son. His name is Calvin. He went to a few preschools, and they were just like, he's not up to par with the other 3-year-olds or et cetera. So I got him tested, and he was diagnosed delayed. I recognized that in him because I had the same issue with me growing up. I'm like, everything was just kind of moving at a faster pace than I can actually digest. So when I noticed that he had this issue, I started tutoring him at home, and this was after I decided to leave education alone. But I went to school to help kids exactly like him. So every night I used to tutor him, make sure he was recognizing his alphabets, learning math. And now he's at the point where he no longer has an IEP, and he's at the top of his class. I have an autoimmune disease called lupus, and being around kids and germs was detrimental to my health in a major way. So that was the last push that I needed to get out of the classroom because of my health was in jeopardy. And that's why I started Victorious Foods, a healthy meal option, meal plan, and changing my diet has really helped with my illness. I believe that teachers are very important. I feel like this world wouldn't be molded the way that it is without teachers. You need a teacher to help you with any career path in life.
Our special thanks to Victoria McCoy for sharing her story. Now let's join our panel that's here to share their views on the teacher shortage crisis. And we'll start with Victoria McCoy, who's here today with us on the panel, joining us as a parent. And also, as we saw in the video, you were at one point a substitute teacher, so we can talk a little bit about your experience both in the classroom and then, of course, being a parent and experiencing education from that point of view. Sarah Hopson is joining us. She is a former teacher as well. She is a scholar of ethnodrama, and she's the president of the Community Allies Consulting Incorporated, so we'll talk about that in just a moment. Stephanie Alexander from Jennings School District is the Director of Federal Programs and Personnel Services for Jennings, and Anna Westland, who is the Director of Recruitment for the St. Louis Public Schools. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us today. So what I'd like to do is just start with each of you telling a little bit about the work that you're doing right now. How just give us a little brief bio, maybe just a sentence or two about what you are doing in schools right now. And then we're going to come back and talk about how the teacher shortage is actually affecting you and your jobs in the schools as you see it right now. Victoria, tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days.
So right now I own my own company called Victorious Foods. It is a meal prep service that offers alternative healthy options to eat. So people kind of go on my website, order their food for the week, and I deliver it to them.
Perfect. So you're active, busy mom in our community. Very
Yes.
good. All right, Sarah, tell us a little bit about your work with Community Alliances.
So I started Community Allies about 3 years ago, and I'm the president and founder. And we work with teachers and schools and organizations, businesses, as well as students. We run after-school programs, and we support students and teachers in taking on the leadership roles that they want to have in schools.
All right.
And making the kind of changes that they want to see.
So very, very involved with the schools throughout the St. Louis community. Yep. Are you working primarily in the city or throughout the county as well?
Primarily in the city, but also in the county. Yep.
Okay, very good. Stephanie, tell us about your work in Jennings.
Hi, I'm the Stephanie Alexander. I'm the Director of Personnel Services for the Jennings School District. I also deal with federal programs. I've been in Jennings for 21 years in education and in the role for 12 years. And so I recruit, hire, and train teachers, principals, support staff. So I am HR in Jennings. And I'm also proud to be the president of the local chapter of MOASPA, which is the school personnel organization here in St. Louis.
So you're deeply involved in if there is a teacher shortage crisis, you're living it right now. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. Anna, and you also are involved with recruitment and HR for the St. Louis Public Schools. Tell us a little bit about that.
Like Stephanie, I'm the Director of Recruitment for St. Louis Public Schools. So I'm embedded in the Human Resources Department. So I do all of our sourcing, our pipeline work, our recruitment, kind of candidate cultivation and getting candidates to principals' hands. Before this role, I was a principal in St. Louis Public Schools, and before that, I was a coach and a teacher.
All right, very good. So you're deeply entrenched as well, and I love all of your experiences. You're all bringing something different to the conversation tonight, which is really great. So Anna, let's start with you, because you have obviously a wide background dealing both as a principal in a school and now directly in HR. Have you seen throughout your career, have you directly experienced this teacher shortage crisis that we're talking about tonight?
I absolutely have in all of those roles. So I entered education through an alternative route called Teach for America, which purports to fill vacancies that cannot be filled. It's not an ideal route, but I mean, that was my entry point into the field. As a principal, we all know our teachers are the most essential ingredient in our schools, and it took more energy than anything else as a principal to find and cultivate great teachers. And then as I live my current role, Director of Recruitment, trying to fill 1,700 teacher roles across St. Louis City, it is incredibly real when you're talking about finding 300 to 400 new teachers every year, that we are in a severe shortage both locally and nationally.
So starting with Teach for America, and we can talk more about that in the second half of our show when we talk about solutions, which maybe that is one of the solutions. When you joined that program, was your intent to become a teacher, or is it a love that grew through that service?
Mm-hmm. My intent was absolutely not to become a teacher. I was headed towards an intelligence agency in Washington, D.C., and could not sign the paperwork because I was not convinced that it was 100% good. And I thought education is a sector in society that does promote good. So I kind of made a philosophical decision and pivoted and became a middle school Spanish teacher, thinking I would teach for 3 years, but then was recruited kind of into the next phase, and before long found myself in St. Louis as a principal, and don't intend to leave the education field now.
And was the experience with Teach for America, did that come before or after or during the decision to not follow that path to Washington, D.C.?
At the same time. So I had paperwork from both and couldn't go the route I thought that I had, the route I had been planning for 22 years.
Yeah.
couldn't do.
Yeah, very interesting, very interesting, and what great experience that you have. So we'll come back to you in just a moment. Let's talk, Stephanie, about Jennings and in your role. So Anna is recruiting for 1,700 teachers, teacher positions. What is it like in your school district?
So our district is probably only about 600 more students than the number of teachers she has to do for years. So we only have 2,300 students, and I have about 185 and 190 teachers. Our vacancies are not as large. However, when we have them, they're in those high needs areas of math, science, you know, foreign language if you need a foreign language and things like that, or our special ed, which we partner with Special School District of St. Louis County. And so finding those positions to teach science, to teach math are very, very difficult, especially when you're looking for quality teachers to teach urban students across your district. So we don't look for just anybody to work in our district. We look for a high caliber of person who not only has content knowledge, however, they also have a passion for kids and to do the work, because really our district is about doing the work and putting students first.
And the math and science types of shortages that we're seeing here is relevant throughout the country.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's not just a Jennings problem, it's not a St. Louis public problem, it's not even a Missouri problem, but it's a nationwide problem where just in general the teacher shortage across the nation is extremely real, and our teacher education programs are seeing less and less students across the nation, where, you know, universities here in our own backyard are closing or limiting the options of what they're offering for education.
So specifically, the topic of teacher shortages, and for both of you, what does that mean in terms of numbers? And you said that maybe for you, Stephanie, it's more teacher retention each year to keep the teachers in place. You say the shortages aren't as great. What is it? Tell me the numbers on what we're looking at in terms of the shortage of teachers, and also Anna, for you in the city schools.
So in my district, because we only have a small amount of teachers, you know, it may be 2 science vacancies or 1 to 2 math vacancies at the middle school and the high school, because we only have 1 high school and 1 middle school. But however, those 3 to 4 vacancies are huge because we don't have trained educators in that role. So we have to bring someone in who has a sub-certificate or may have content knowledge but not the pedagogy to be in a classroom. So, you know, those things really, really affect the level of instruction that someone has. It affects relationships and just overall the makeup of a classroom.
So you're compromising on quality, it sounds
Absolutely.
like. All right, Anna, what about you? In the 1,700 positions that you are filling each year, whether you're retaining. So what is it like this year? We just started a school year. How real was this shortage for you?
It's incredibly real. I think, to answer your question, I would actually think about what students deserve. And so if we're talking about, you know, some executive level or Bain Consulting or something like this, you're going to have 200 applicants for 1 job. And when we're talking about math, science, sped, we're talking about a ratio of maybe 2 applicants per job. And so when we're talking about like what students deserve, I don't know, like the way I feel it as real is we don't have a lot of choices to get them the best possible applicant, because it's not an incredibly competitive pool, because we are all trying to get the same people. Yeah. And so from a number standpoint, that looks like us trying to hire 400 new teachers a year. That looks like us mostly filling those vacancies, but to Stephanie's point, some of those are filled with substitutes. And so the principal may be happy, the students, the parents might not even know it's a substitute because you can't tell. Right. But on paper, it's going to look like, you know, we have 50, 60, 70 teacher vacancies.
Right. We're going to continue this conversation in just a moment. The shortage obviously is real. Listening to each of the stories you've heard so far, something needs to be done in St. Louis alone to help decrease this teacher shortage. When we come back, we'll share what needs to be done. Stay with us.
Do you want to know what city government is doing for you?
Yes, Mr. President. Board Bill 69 committee substitutes the budget bill for the Parking Commission. And this bill is a big deal and a great deal for the citizens of the city of St. Louis.
Watch STL TV, the city government channel, then you'll know.
Hey Bobo, do trees tell each other stories?
I'm sorry, I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, why don't we go find out? Listen.
Can birds draw pictures?
I don't have an answer for that.
Dad, do stars visit their friends?
Look!
Welcome back. In case you're just joining us, today's topic is education, the teacher shortage crisis. Our panel has shared their stories on the impact it's caused, and now we'd like to share some ideas for solutions as well as what is being done here in St. Louis. Let's start with Sarah Hopson, president of Community Allies Incorporated, and you have a background as a former teacher, so you've seen this firsthand and can maybe speak to the teacher shortage and how it's affected you and how you've seen it and what solutions you might have.
So I've been a long-term career educator for about over 20 years. And when I started as a high school teacher, I was a passionate teacher who wanted to connect with every single student, and I wanted their education to be meaningful and relevant and real world. And I was teaching in a suburban school outside of Boston. And that was about the time that 9/11 happened and lots of things were happening in our country. And I had so many questions in my head that I couldn't sleep anymore because I really felt like I could be doing more for students and that I needed my hands to be untied and I needed to be collaborating with more teachers and I needed to be learning with teachers. And I just felt very isolated too. And so I was in a master's degree program and I sat down for the first time in a classroom with a professor who said, "What are your questions about education? What are your questions about parents, about schools, about how everything works?" And I started writing and I never stopped writing. And I went on to get a PhD in reading, writing, and literacy. And there I started to develop a way of teaching that connects ethnodrama with literacy. And
So what is ethnodrama? Tell us about that and how does that help with and address the teacher shortage?
So ethnodrama is a way of looking at social issues from lots of perspectives. So students or teachers or anybody who's using ethnodrama interviews a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds, turns the interviews into films and dramas, and uses the films and dramas to facilitate cross-cultural problem solving and collective action.
Well, it sounds like, too, from what you're saying and what your background is, that you felt that your hands were tied, in your words, as a teacher, and that maybe that's part of the problem today is that teachers aren't given enough liberty to teach the way they want to teach, and you're able to bring that to schools through as an outside resource. Is that correct?
Yes, but I'm also working in an environment where I'm aware that there are top-down policies. I witnessed that as a teacher. I witnessed that as a teacher educator at a university level. And so when I started Community Allies, I started it to place resources in teachers' hands that they could go and invent and create with. And the resources that I encourage are teacher collaborative communities where they are researching their practices together, learning how to document their practices as they go, and following students, learning student languages, learning student cultures, learning student desires and questions, the traumas that they're bringing to the classroom, what they want to make sense of in through their education.
So do you feel that if this method of teaching was more prevalent in our public school systems, that perhaps more people would be drawn to the role of teaching?
I do. I think that we are not respecting teachers enough as intellectuals, as inquiry-based practitioners who we're punishing them. We're telling them you have to teach in a certain way, your students have to pass a certain kind of test, and we're narrowing our literacy instruction too much. And so teachers are in the classroom and they're hungry to connect with their students and they're hungry to learn how to connect with their students more meaningfully. And instead what we're doing is we're handing them packaged curricula that they don't necessarily have the autonomy that they need to invent together and reinvent together through their own knowledge of practice, because they're the ones who are running our schools.
Right, so there's a high level, we know from research, of dissatisfaction among teachers in our American society today. There's also a high amount of stress we've seen from the research. Victoria, let's talk about that from your experience. So as a parent, but also at one point you were a substitute teacher, so you saw schools from that point of view as well. Tell us about that and how you believe that perhaps dissatisfaction and stress might be leading also to the shortage.
Yeah, so I had a passion to teach students like me. Like I said on the video, I just had a difficult time learning in school. I just needed more time to digest the information that was given to me. So when I went to school to be a teacher, I focused in on different creative learning styles to help students. And when I actually got in the classroom and when they do hand you the curriculum, it's like, okay, I have this curriculum, but this child needs more time. This child learns this way. You can't cater the activity to that person, and everything felt rushed. And with the standardized testing, it was just kind of a hindrance. It discouraged the student because everything they just learned, they're trying to obtain it quick as possible and get it onto the paper, and they're not necessarily learning, they're just kind of memorizing, because as soon as the test is over, the information is gone. So, and that was kind of discouraging for me as a teacher. I wanted to be able to be a help instead of a hindrance, and I was kind of on the fence about staying a teacher, and I wanted to be an effective teacher. And eventually I got out of the role of being a teacher, but I'm very involved with my son's education, and I tutor him every night, and I make sure I have a great relationship with this teacher now, and we work on a lot of different issues he has, whether it was reading or math. We collaborated on a lot of different projects together, and I tutor him at home, and it showed in school.
And do you find that his teacher is receptive to your involvement?
Yes, she's very receptive. We text and we email a few times a month just to make sure he's up to par, and I'm doing what I need to do as a parent. And it's kind of a relationship with teachers and parents. When they send those notes home, read 20 minutes a day with your child, that makes a world of difference. And my son's going into his classroom very confident.
Yeah. Stephanie and Anna, I want to talk to you about the things that we're hearing from Sarah and Victoria. Stephanie, let's start with you, the Jennings School District, and the culture, and how important is the culture of the school district as a whole, but also do you feel that teachers in your district are given the liberty to go off the curriculum, or are they rushed and stressed because they're trying to fit all this into a limited amount of time?
Well, I mean, culture and climate of a district is very important, and so how you embrace your teachers and give them the opportunity to have the autonomy to teach the curriculum. So we have to have guidelines and standards. We get standards from DESE that we have to teach certain standards, and the tests are mandated by DESE. But we believe that if you teach the skills and the strategies of reading and writing and mathematics, those strategies and skills are going to go from first grade to 12th grade or kindergarten to 12th grade, and it's not just teaching to a test. And so we're about life skills that you can take with you once you leave our doors. Also, giving teachers the autonomy to be creative. I mean, nobody wants to go to a boring classroom, so we want to make sure students are engaged, and so we're not just lecturing the students, making sure that real life comes, we put the world into what they're learning so that they have that real world experience. And so, yes, we do have to have guidelines. However, we give the culture and climate of your district allows that person to have the autonomy to do what they need to do.
Mm-hmm. Anna, some of the things that Stephanie is talking about and Sarah talked about, and bringing in new ideas into the classroom, giving teachers the opportunity to explore teaching in their own unique way. How does that resonate from your experience with the St. Louis City schools here?
I think there's two tensions. So one, every teacher I know that works for us is an absolute champion. Like, I've never met people more inspirational than our teachers. On the other end of that is that our education system, locally, statewide, nationally, is fundamentally broken. And so you have teachers, and you're hearing an argument about whether or not curriculum is required, but that's not really the root of the issue. Like, the root of the issue is how nationally we're not stacking up internationally. And so if you look at our PISA and TIM scores, we're not competitive with other advanced economies. And so then you have all of these layers trying to figure out how do we raise the bar. But if you trickle that down, we all know that there's a funding disparity between schools, and it often breaks down on poverty levels and race. And if we know that, we're talking about curriculum instead of the root causes, I think, of the educational disparities in America, we're missing this opportunity. And so I think, I'm not trying to evade your question, because I do think if we had a better educational context and system, then you empower teachers. They are experts of their craft, and they get to be autonomous. Yeah. But we're strapped because we have retention issues. So if you're training 400 new teachers a year, you don't have the luxury of training them to become experts.
All right, and where do teachers' salaries come into this mix in this conversation?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, if you look at data, people don't leave because of salary. That's not the primary reason people leave their managers or people leave their working conditions. And I think that connects to this larger broken context that is severely underfunded and that is severely political and pretty top down. But if you look at salary and why people don't go into education, I think what we're actually finding is that in a country like Finland or Norway, your highest performing high school graduates are going into education. That is not the case in America.
And how do the salaries in those countries compare to what teachers are paid here?
So they're comparable to what our lawyers and doctors are.
So they're higher.
Yes,
They're
I mean,
higher.
these are more socialist countries, so you're not going to see huge disparities anyway.
Yeah, and Sarah, why don't you, what's your opinion on teacher salaries and how that's affecting this crisis?
Well, I will say this, that we are paying teachers at a poverty level. And we have teachers across our country who are working 2 jobs to be able to provide for students. And teaching is not just a full-time job, it's a 60-hour plus job if you really are passionate, which people who are working 2 jobs to be able to be with our students are really passionate. So it's a problem. It's a major problem. I do think that the funding for schools, and I really love what you had to say, Anna, when we look at regionally, so often we say, what's wrong with teachers? That's the wrong question. What's wrong with our society? Why have we let school districts not have the kind of funding that they need? And there are so many reasons for that, but we need to start to connect those dots as a region and really think in the direction of how can we all be involved in being regional advocates for all of our youth, and in thinking about ways that we can lobby our legislators to put aside funds that can go and can serve our school districts better.
Very good. Thank you all so much. And what we've heard tonight is that this teacher shortage crisis is real. It's real in St. Louis. It's real across the country. There's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of solutions. There's also a lot of very impassioned people right here in our own community who want to make and bring change to our schools. So we want to thank all of our guests today for sharing their stories with us today on the issues. And you don't want to miss our next edition of The Issues. We'll have a panel discussing how St. Louis leads the nation in prenatal deaths among African American women. How do women have a healthy pregnancy in our city? Stay tuned. Thanks to each and every one of you who tune into The Issues and share your comments. Just want to remind everyone that you can join the discussion too. Be sure to check us out online and at Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. And don't forget to download the free STL TV app. That does it for this issue of The Issues, or this episode of The Issues, but keep it right here on STL TV and experience St. Louis.